Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this masterclass on how you navigate POPI Act Compliance. And I know it's in the middle of the afternoon for you guys, and hopefully we'll get through this in an hour. Just a quick.
So hopefully we'll finish in an hour.
I hope so. I hope so too. And we had a lot of people registering. Thank you. We are overwhelmed by all your registrations. I really appreciate that. Please mute your microphones and do not share your videos because this session is being recorded. We will share any materials and video replay by email at the end of this. Okay, if you have any question, just type it in the chat and we will try to address them as soon as possible. There's a lot to cover here. Let's see if we can get it done. Let me quickly introduce my disclaimer. We're not providing any legal advice, though this is about compliance and POPI Act. But if you need to consult your attorney, if you need this. So what are we going to cover? We're just going to cover what is the POPI Act, what do you need with respect to policies and planning, data subject requests and telemarketing, direct marketing, what you need to do about that. Are you collecting data? Are you processing data? Any special data you're processing, what you need to do about that. Data protection, security, will inform you about it. And then, as a project, how do you set it up? How do you implement it? What are the next steps? So the key takeaways for you out of this would be, you need to just get started if you have not started already and complete your implementation. And this is all the stuff that we are talking here is at no cost to you, including some of the software we will discuss. We provide at no cost. Some of the policies we generate, we provide it at no cost. So you will see that. Okay. So having said that, let me introduce my team. My name is DV. I'm the founder and CEO of Essert. And I also wrote this book on the POPI Act Compliance. I've been in the cybersecurity and privacy space for nearly 2 decades now. So pretty big. And we have Brad on the call. Hi, Brad.
Hi, DV. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Hammer. I'm a Chief Privacy Officer at Essert. I've been practicing data privacy law for about 10 years now in a bunch of different jurisdictions. And yeah, looking forward to this. And one thing I will note just for the group, if you put a question in the chat, if we're in the middle of the discussion, I'll save all the questions. Some of them we might address later at the end if it's not immediately applicable to what we're discussing. So just know I'm keeping an eye on the chat and I will grab all those questions as we go. So.
And we also have Dr. JC Reddy. Hi, JC.
We've got to stop the video.
We can't hear you, JC.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is JC, and I'm the CTO of Essert. My specialty is, of course, building the enterprise software. I've been doing that for about 25 years. And this is my third from scratch software build-up exercise. Yeah.
JC is very modest. He is an AI expert. He's a machine learning expert. All the stuff that you're going to see today is built by him and the team. So you would see some of that stuff and you'll see what we are talking about here. Okay. Now, having said that, let's jump in. Brad, just primer. What is the POPI Act and why do companies need to comply for the POPI Act?
Sure. I mean, the POPI Act is South Africa's first comprehensive data privacy law, right? So, it's South Africa's answer to what has been going on in Europe for several years in terms of GDPR and a GDPR style law, in the sense that if you're collecting and processing the personal information or personal data any citizens of South Africa. There's certain minimum standards you have to meet that will include, protecting the data, respecting the privacy rights and the requests of those individuals, and making sure that the manner in which you're doing it and the purposes that you're doing it are all within the scope of the law. So
absolutely, and it applies to every entity, every company, whether you are a subcontractor or a single person, individual subcontractor working, whether you are a very large company, a public company, or a government body, it applies to everybody. And it actually relates to how consumers can, or anybody you have information about can access their rights. And we'll discuss that in more detail. It's effective as of last year, and the information regulator had stated earlier that they are going to give some more time for companies to actually comply. And as recently as about 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, the regulator went publicly out and saying they're going to start enforcement. Okay, so watch out for enforcement coming down, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't have to go through this, but you understand where the history of the POPI Act is, and the act was signed in 2013, and now it's effective. It took a decade to get that effective. Well, I am many times I'm concerned about this, but often I'm not hyper concerned about it. I'm more concerned about the data breach costs than about the information regulator fines. The information regulator will. Somebody needs to mute
Somebody.
Thank you. The information regulator has just about starting enforcement. We're not sure how they're going to come down on the fines, right, Brad? I mean, it's still up in the air about that, but the data breach costs are real, aren't they? I mean, Brad, you see this every day with nearly every
Yeah,
customer.
I mean, the data breach costs are real and ongoing, and frankly, existed before the POPI Act, but they're just getting more expensive now that the POPI Act is in existence, right? And right. the reality of the regulator is, and that's part of the reason we stressed in the beginning is to do something, because if you are taking some action, hopefully that'll be recognized by the regulator, and you'll get a little bit of leeway on that. But they're going to probably be focusing on the companies and entities that aren't doing anything, right? Because there's going to be a fair number of those, I'm sure. So.
Right, and we will focus our session today on doing the minimum actions at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you should be able to get them done within a matter of a few hours, if not a few days. So let's show you how that can be accomplished. The risk of the breach is very important, and I think you should do something about it, and we'll discuss briefly about that. If you do have a breach, like for example, the Experian breach that has impacted nearly 1 million South African businesses, right? You have to notify your customers. You have to, inform the regulator who may start an investigation, and then obviously the recovery costs. Just going through that process itself is expensive. Okay, so and having said that, will the law be enforced? Brad, this is anybody's guess. I think it is going to be enforced. The regulator is well funded.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 1 year, they've separated themselves away from the Department of Justice and created their own independent entity so they can actually manage their own operational elements of it, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, funding and independence in a regulator usually equals an active regulator, because they've got sort of a singular they've got a singular focus and they've got money to do it. So
that's right. And obviously they're getting staffed, and I have seen them put out a lot of job recs on their website, and they constantly keep tweeting about their job requirements. So they are actively hiring. Okay. Now, having said that, how do you comply? I mean, this is pretty simple. Like 4 areas, right? You need to have your policies correct and notices done correctly. You need to be able to process requests from data subjects, right? And you need to ensure that you have lawful processing of data. So
Right.
just get your data flow stuff together, things like that. And obviously, data protection is another major area that you need to be conversant with and address it. So there's 4 areas that you need to address, right? Right.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And when you're talking about things like lawful processing, that's where we said, this isn't legal advice. You're going to need to consult that, but it's by identifying the data flows, you can then go to the law and identify, are we within this lawful processing as defined
Right.
by the law? Do we have the purposes under the law? And then
Right.
that's exactly right. Some of the other things in terms of policies and data subject rights, which are some of the minimum things we really want to be talking about today, are a little bit more procedural and not easier necessarily, but a little bit more straightforward than some of the other elements. So
Right. Let's address the low-hanging fruit. Okay.
yes, exactly. Absolutely.
So having said that, the implementation framework does involve a number of activities. We won't have time to go through each one of these activities in this conversation today, but overall, it's quite simple, actually. Get your notices and policies correct, number one, right? And if there are any changes to policies, it is a good idea to actually review these policies 6 months, if not at least once a year. So you can update those policies, keep that at the back of your mind. And these policies just could be employee privacy policy, maybe candidates, you're actually hiring somebody and you're capturing information of the candidates, doing background checks. What's your policy associated with those elements of it? You need to be able to do that. I'm just giving you a spattering of things, right? So Brad, in addition, we got these partner agreements going on. Why is that important?
Yeah, so anytime you're sharing data with a partner or maybe a vendor that you're hiring to do some sort of data processing, affiliated companies, sometimes if you have affiliated companies inside or outside of South Africa, the law wants you to make sure that all that processing is happening in compliance. And the way that you do that is by executing the appropriate agreements.
Exactly. And of course, your customers, supposing, say, you're putting in some tenders, we have seen already, almost for the past 18 months, we've seen tender requirements having privacy rights management, cybersecurity management as part and parcel of the tender requirements. So what you do as part of the POPI Act compliance framework and the reports you would generate from our system could potentially be useful to actually go to your customers and say, hey, we are compliant. Here is our privacy policy. Here is our PAIA manual. Here is all the other things that we have put together. So and the impact assessment reports, et cetera, et cetera. So you can do all of those, right?
Yep.
And then comes the rights management. So if somebody, why is this important? Brad, this is important. It's very simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the quickest ways to end up in front of the regulator is to make somebody whose data you have mad, and that's usually the law requires you to be responsive to the rights that they have under the law, and if you're either ignoring them or refusing them those rights, the regulator would welcome that because it gives them a place to focus, right? Exactly. So that's a key part here is that one of the quickest ways to end up on the regulator's radar is by having customers complaining about you. So.
And you obviously need to have a standard operating procedure for managing those rights and responding to them. Because if you're responding to Jane Doe versus somebody else, right? And you are providing information of John Doe to Jane Doe, that's not good. Right.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. You need to have a way to effectively not only be responsive, but be responsive in a compliant way. So you're not causing a data breach by responding to a data subject request.
Exactly. And we've already seen complaints on that front. Yep. Exactly. Right. So it not only constitutes unlawful processing of data, but it also constitutes a data breach at the same time. Right. So you need to avoid those kinds of situations. And of course, the change management and the process, you need to have an information officer. We'll go through some of this stuff. right now, and we'll talk about data security. So while there are a number of items, but the low-hanging fruit are even we've created a very short list of something that you can do that is public facing, that you should do, rather you must do right away if you're not compliant already. Okay. So it really comes down to the information officer, right? You have to register an information officer. You need to have somebody designated as an information officer. Otherwise, the regulator considers the CEO of the company as the information officer, isn't it, Brad?
Yeah, and yes, and that's one. It's one of the slightly different elements as compared to some of the other comprehensive privacy laws that, you know, if anybody on the call is familiar with, or the presentation familiar with, you know, GDPR and some of those. This is one where every company needs to have some sort of DPO, data privacy officer, right? It's not, there's not an exception. There's not a balancing to determine if your process is risky enough. You need to do something and they need to be appropriately high within the organization. That's why the default is to somebody at executive level if you haven't registered somebody. And to be perfectly honest, if you're doing business and you're not registered, that's also a red flag for the regulator as well. So
exactly. And obviously there are some issues that the regulator portal is having, but that should not stop you from actually sending in the paperwork. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the regulator is not concerned about whether their portal is working. They're concerned about whether you're doing your job. Okay. They may not be doing their job. You should be doing your job. That's the whole idea there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Now comes to the data collection and data flow. I mean, this is another major critical item, right, Brad? If you don't know what data you have, where you have it, you have no idea, you know, whether you're you're lawfully processing certain data or not lawfully processing it, right?
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, this is one of the, it's one of the more challenging parts, but it's something that you can start by just, you know, having some basic discussions with your team about what systems they're using and where the data is going and that kind of thing. So yeah, because if you have somebody come and say, please delete my information, or what information do you have about me, you need to know where that information is and what systems it's in and that kind of thing, in order to reply to that. And then it also helps you on the side of, we talked about the contracts already. Who do you need contracts with? How are you addressing that? So
exactly. And that includes whether you're sharing information with individuals or other companies, whether you're storing information in the cloud or with your vendors, background information, for example, you know, background checks. Just go back to that as a default, right? Which every company does, background checks. You know, where are you storing that data? Is it sitting in some paper files, or is it sitting in your G drive or OneDrive or someplace else? You need to know where it is, as an example.
No, and that's a great point that people sometimes forget. We're not just talking about electronic data here; it's all data. So if you've got file cabinets full of information, you need to be taking that into account as well in terms of practices and stuff. That's arguably a little bit easier to secure in the sense that someone can't hack into your systems and steal it, but it still needs to be accounted for. So
absolutely. And the other thing is, don't buy any personal information. You know, the buying of information is now a big no-no. Right. So if you were sourcing in personal information like lead lists or call center lists, etc., from a third party, you know, without appropriate contractual documents on ownership and opt-ins and opt-outs and that kind of stuff, then you're in big trouble there, right?
Yeah, really the key there is especially around, you know, consent and opting in, and has the individual consented to that sharing or your use of the data, that kind of thing. And odds are, if you're purchasing it, probably not, because I don't know a ton of people that consent to saying, I would like you to sell my personal information to somebody, but that's yeah, you're absolutely right.
And to be clear, right?
Yeah.
What does lawful data processing mean, right? Lawful data processing mean is, what purpose are you capturing the data or processing the data? What, you know, if you're actually capturing the data to actually send an invoice, that's lawful processing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
if you're capturing the data to actually sell it to somebody else, that's not lawful processing
Right.
unless
Right.
you specify why you're doing that, right?
Exactly.
So just so you understand, so the purpose of collecting data and processing data is one of the key elements in POPI compliance, POPI Act compliance. No, having said that, direct marketing, telemarketing, Brad, this is very simple, right?
Yeah.
You must collect data directly, which we just talked about. You know, don't buy lists, right? You must get consent, right? Especially if it's not partners or customers or potential customers who would likely come to your website and stuff like that. You need to have an opt-in, opt-out feature by default when you're doing direct marketing, right? Which means that obviously you need to provide ability to withdraw consent. This is what all email marketing's systems do. They provide you an unsubscribe button. Okay, you
Sure.
need to
Yep.
have that in your email marketing templates, right? Now, having said that, consumer rights, I think we've discussed this briefly, but this is all about opt-in, opt-out, access to data, right to know whether you have the data, ability to correct data. So if you got Jane Doe's name incorrect, right? So you need to be able to correct that name, for example, or if they ask you to delete it. And this is a difficult one, deleting data, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because, one, you have to take into account everywhere it could possibly be in order to confirm it. And the other side of the deletion is, if there is a purpose, if you're asked to delete information, but you have some sort of business purpose to continue using it, for example, they're an active customer and you have to send them something every month or something like that. I mean, obviously there's going to be exceptions under there, but it's one of the ones where you really have to weigh, it can't just be an automatic, especially if somebody, somebody might request deletion, and you need to confirm that it's actually them and that you're not purging data of somebody when you shouldn't be as well. So
right. And you need to have a way for them to exercise these rights, either by email or web intake form or some method, right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Essert provides you a web intake form that you can deploy on your website, and we'll show you how. So just gives you an idea about what you can do, what's the easiest thing to do. We recommend web intake forms because they are not as error prone as email or paper forms, right? So you can reduce a lot of errors in terms of using technology, right?
Yep.
Now we can go through this in more detail, but we won't have too much time to review this in detail on how you process the requests coming in, the data subject requests coming in. But all said and done, you have about 60 days to respond, and you absolutely have to verify the request. Who is the person? Is it the exact person who is actually requesting it? Can you check either by SAID or by some other method, maybe OTP to their mobile phones, stuff like that, right? So that becomes really important, especially when it comes to access and corrections and deletions of data. You've got to be a bit more diligent, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the the key here is to just be responsive, right? Don't, and doing so in a timely manner requires some amount of pre-work, but if you got 30 to 60 days, you should have enough time to safely respond to them. But you need to make sure that your channels are operating correctly and that you have plenty of time to do any kind of verifications that you need.
Yeah, this is an area where we initially do not recommend full automation. We are an automation provider, and we are telling you don't do automation upfront until you know exactly how your systems are working and doing all of that stuff.
Exactly.
We have seen many companies not succeed very well when they jumped into automation right away. We would recommend first putting your standard operating procedures manually first, and then start to figure out what to automate one by one. Okay. Cool. Having said that, I can go through data breaches, etc., for a long time, but all said and done, they're expensive for you. Okay, do something about it. And it's not about, whether you have a data breach, it's about when are you likely to have one. Okay, it's going to happen, right? So be careful about it, put some security practices in place. And you definitely need protection from data theft. Obviously, it'll cost you a lot of money. Yeah. Having said that, Brad, we can't leave this conversation without saying buy some kind of cyber liability coverage.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And do so, do so carefully and make sure that it's going to give you the right kind of coverage and that you need. But by all means, yeah, when you see settlements around cyber issues and lawsuits and all that, a lot of times it comes down to what, how much insurance coverage is there, and there'll be some settlement around that. And you need that sort of ahead of time. And then that sometimes that it's having that cyber liability insurance will also help clarify some things around, like, your insurance may have a preferred data breach lawyer that they like, or preferred vendor for forensics and that kind of thing. And so it can help answer some of those questions if you're working on like an incident response plan and that. So that's also helpful. So,
and we have seen that the costs of insurance is not significant. If you're a small company, for example, depending on the type of coverage, you could buy insurance for, say, 1,000 rand a month, or just over that. Okay, it should not be very expensive for you to get coverage. We would recommend that you do get coverage for cyber liability. Maybe it's part of your umbrella insurance policy. Just look into it. Right. Cool. Having said that, how does Essert help? We have so far not talked about our company, what we provide, etc. Now we can tell you how we can help you. Brad, any questions that you want to address?
Yeah, let's maybe address some of the questions that we have before we launch in. Yep. So somebody said that as a private citizen, there's call centers continuously calling your phone. I asked if they got the number, and they put the phone down. I'm very apologetic. So in terms of recourse, I mean, that's what the regulator is for. If you can find out a company name, if they will not stop calling and, to complain about that company name and turn in that company phone number or something to that effect, right? We're early enough in this process where there could still be buying and selling of data going on, or someone is using a list they shouldn't be. But complaining to the regulator is your primary recourse, right?
Right.
Somebody said if the CEO is information officer by default, will registration still be required? So the law requires registration, right? Like the law says someone needs to be registered. And so that will be a red flag if you don't register anyone, even though somebody will become it by default. The point of having somebody registered is if, for example, somebody complains about your company, then they have a point of contact to address that. And which you, in some respects, you would like, because a complaint, as anybody might know, a customer complaint might be valid, it might not be. And so if you can address it with the regulator and say, like, actually, this if this is not the case, then you might be able to do that before things get too far down the road. So how does this act apply in the public service? So, I mean, it applies to public entities the same as it applies to private entities. Right. In the sense that the basic requirements are the same. I mean, practically speaking, I suppose there might be some slight differences, because if it's a public entity, it's not profit driven, so you might have different motivations in that. But practically speaking, that the law applies the same way. Example
would be municipalities and public utilities.
Yep.
Right? They have a lot of information about you because they need to send you a bill for electricity, for garbage collection, for water, for whatever, right? So if when they are sending you the bill, they're processing your data, they're processing your credit cards, they're processing a lot of information associated with it, right?
Sure.
And that is one of the main, it's not the main element, but it's a great element to actually look at from that angle, right?
Yep. So we got one more here, and I'm trying to. They said that there's a credit bureau who has an option for social media checking, and they inquired how they get the information. They said they monitor online activity and find those that are online a lot during the day are less productive. I suppose, if you are engaging, if you're on social media and it's publicly available in some way, shape, or form, then that's that social media company's prerogative to say that they're how they're sharing that information. And then on if there's a credit bureau collecting it, there should be some disclosures in place there. I can't get into the intricate. It's going to be a pretty in the weeds, complicated question in terms of how they're doing that, in terms of scraping data and maybe the AI associated with that. But
I would say this, right? Social media companies are pretty clear with their privacy policy and with their content usage. If users of the social media and putting out their information on the social media sites, for example, it's governed by their rules, right? So you need to look at their rules on how they are able to share or display the information for other companies to actually scrape. Simple as that, right?
Yep. All right, a couple more that came in just quick, and then we can get off before we move on. The information officer can be registered on the information officer's website. I believe we have a way to do that through Essert as well, in terms of filling the form out. Or
what we are going to show you one of the ways today.
Yep.
It's and we tried with the regulator to directly send the information officer registration forms, and they're not ready for that.
Yeah.
Even today. We tried to create our own different type of form, which is easy to fill, and the information regulator said, no, we won't accept this. So they'll have two ways: either go directly to their portal or fill in the form, and we have the form available for you to download and fill it in and email it to them or send it to them by post. Okay.
Yep. And then affordable cyber liability insurance is unfortunately something you just have to shop for. I don't necessarily have a reference for how to do that. I do understand that it can be expensive, but I don't necessarily have a reference for that.
Yeah, we are trying, Brad, we are trying to actually partner with the cyber liability insurance company. We haven't figured out ways to do it in a much easier way, right? So we are ready for that. We will announce it.
Yep. And then, so the last two I'll just fire off here. In terms of, someone asked if they could collect certain data as a part of a job application process. That's something you need to talk about with your lawyers. That's really looking at your lawful processing purposes. And then a bunch of feedback about the regulator website not working. That happens. Our understanding is it's about a 50-50 shot if your registration will go through in the portal that they have, because it frequently is not working. And so I see actually a lot of questions coming through now. If it's a really specific question about CCTV and what data things you can collect from job applicants, that's really not something we can answer here, because is getting into the it's getting into the realm of legal advice. We're really, so that, if it's really specific data processing, you're going to need to consult with a local lawyer or something on that. So
or sign up to one of our work lists, and we'll show you how to do that, because we have social media policies and various
exactly.
And we'll share some.
So there's the ability to do the analysis there, but we're not able to just fire off some of these really intricate questions
in a public forum like this. It's tough to answer specific questions. Okay. Any other that you want to address before?
The only other thing is that there are requirements listed to be an information officer within the law. There's a few things listed. Training's one of them, and again, that's something that you can look at through Essert to some of those items that are available in terms of the specific requirements that you need to meet.
Correct. Cool. So how does Essert help? Essert is a platform for compliance operations. So we help you get set up. We help you streamline your operations. We help you manage all the data subject requests and how you verify them, et cetera. Eventually, the whole idea is to mitigate your risk of compliance. Okay. Now, we keep adding a lot of functionality, new features, and things like that. For example, we are going to come up with something like we talked about cyber liability insurance. We talked about other things such as if you have a data breach, when do you notify the regulator? How do you notify the regulator? There is a specific process that you need to go through so you can actually go ensure that you do it correctly and don't have issues if you do it incorrectly, right? So those kinds of things. So we keep adding that stuff, but overall, it's a compliance platform that is end-to-end management for you. Okay. Now, having said that, we are obviously the experts. We have a lot of customers using our software. We trained a number of POPI experts last year who've been helpful with a number of our customers to get compliant as well. Okay. And of course, we provide fantastic support. You just have to text us. You just have to send us an email and we'll get on a call with you. Okay. Having said that, how do you get compliant fast and doesn't cost you a dime, right?
Well, let me jump in quick here on number one, register information officer and deputy. So one of the questions, the CCTV one that I couldn't read fully when we were talking because it was long, is do I need to register? If I have, everybody needs to register. So this is a security company, has CCTV footage. You are a company, you are collecting personal information, you need to register. As simple as that. Companies, public entities, everybody needs to be registered. Even if you're just one person, like one accountant collecting personal information, you need to be registered. So
right. So the immediate initial steps, we made this extremely easy for you to just follow through. Sign up and follow an onboarding process and you would be done. Right. And one of them could involve some technical ability to do things with your website, but that is something that you can get help from your website team. Okay, so shall we go through this? Let's do that.
Yep.
Let me share that. So if you go to our website, you would have this sign up button. Okay. And I'm logged in, but let me log out. So on the sign up button, you could either sign up using your Gmail, or if you are using Office 365, you can do that also. Or you could just sign up using email. Okay. So just email itself and you just click that and agree and sign up. Okay. I've already signed in, and this is one element of it from a sign up point of view. Okay. So once you sign in, you would get an email. If you're signing using Google or Gmail, none of that stuff will occur. But otherwise, let me just go in and log in and show you what happens. Once you sign in, the step 2 onboarding, this is what will show up on your onboarding screen. There are 4 goals in here. Okay. And you can select USD, you can select Rand, and you will see that. Okay. So if you select the POPI Act Compliance, it's got 2 policies and several videos in here and 4 documents for you to leverage and use. And that will not cost you any money. It's free. It's free forever. So we will not even come back later and charge you. It's free. Okay. So you could select that. And then you would be presented a video, watch the video, gives you some of the things we just talked about. Okay. And get started with step 1. And when you get started with step 1, right, and this is exactly what we talked here, right? We go through the registration, cataloging of your data flows to assert what type of lawful processing you are doing, okay? And then you can create the PAIA manual that you need to deploy on your website. You can auto-generate the privacy policy that you need to deploy on your website. You can even edit it if there is some issues with it. Okay. So let's go back to how we go about doing that, right? So here, obviously, you type in your company information, right? Basic company information, cataloging your data flow, you deploy your PAIA manual, you register your information officer, and you deploy your privacy policy. That deployment could be with a WordPress plugin, and we'll show you how to operate that as well. So that's it. There is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, and you're done, right? So you need to answer. Why do you need to answer the basic company profile? Is because that goes into your policy documents, that goes into your PAIA manual, okay? And your physical address and your company address, website address, email address for somebody to reach to you, right? And the phone number that they reach out to you as a company. And who is your information officer? You may not have registered them, but have you designated an information officer? If you've not designated an information officer, put your CEO's name and phone number and title in here, okay? Having said that, I mean, this is all pre-filled in for me, thankfully, okay? I would recommend not to skip this step because you will face a little bit of an issue when you come back to it, right? So just finish up this element of it. So once you do that, you're presented a number of third-party systems you may use or not use, right? For example, do you use Microsoft Office? We use Office 365 and G Suite, so we selected that, right? It's pre-selected here. I use Calendly, I use Google Workplace, obviously you use Essert, check that. And the G Suite, if you're using G Suite, potentially you use Google Cloud or Azure or Microsoft or G Drive, right? Select those and add them to your catalog, okay? And now once you do that, the system automatically creates your PAIA manual, okay? By the way, this PAIA manual is, in terms of words and verbiage, is the template we took from the information regulator, modified the template, and to make sure that all the information that goes in there would be specific to your company and your use, okay? So, for example, here you could modify the name of the company here again, but we just wrote it. We don't need to do that. So all of that information sits in here, okay? You might want to, if you want to review it and edit it and publish it, you could do that. No issues at all, okay? Remember we said, Essert Inc, who is the deputy information officer, what's the title of the information officer, phone number, email address, all of this needs to actually go into the PAIA manual. And that's a requirement. Okay, you need your information officer contact information needs to be present in your PAIA manual. Okay, and your company contact information also need to be present in the PAIA manual. So we actually provide ensure that that is pre-generated for you. And the categories of this is the key element of it. Lawful processing. What type of lawful processing are you doing? What type of information are you collecting? What category of information are you collecting, right? And so we pre-populate that information based on the data catalogs that you've selected. And this is where the AI element comes into play for you, right? And also, what is the purpose of information collection? This is the lawful processing that Brad and I have been talking to you about. And so, okay, so that gets pre-generated for you, and you now can download this as HTML and deploy it on your website. Okay, or publish it so you can actually deploy it using our WordPress plugin. Okay, we would publish it. You know, when you do publish, it then will be deployed in the WordPress website. Okay, we would publish it. And then we talk about the registration of the information officer. So there is a form that you could download, and that form is available right here. And we'll tell you how to register. We have a video here that shows how you can go register it. You can go online for the portal or not, right? And download that form, fill it in, and send it. Okay, that's the simplest approach we would recommend. Don't try to do portals and stuff like that. Download this form and send it. Okay. Then the next step would be your privacy policy. Okay. Our system auto generates your privacy policy for you. Okay. Hopefully this will come through now. Okay. All right. There it is. Okay. So again, it plugs in the entire privacy notice that will go on your website. We created a simpler short form notice that are very useful. Brad, this is one of the requirements, right?
Yep.
Privacy notice should not be
Yes.
legalese. It should be simple to understand.
Yeah, that's one of the basic elements here, which is challenging because there's on the one side it says there needs to be a lot of stuff in there. On the other side, it needs to be readable. But that's part of this is you have your short form notice that provides some of all that basic information up front, and then it expands outward. So yep, exactly right.
So we actually generate all of this information based on the basic company information and the data catalogs that you filled in. We provided that generated information. Again, you could download this as an HTML or as a PDF, put it on your website, either as a PDF or an HTML, or deploy it using our WordPress plugin as well. Okay. Now let's publish this because we don't have many changes to this. All this is really nicely laid out and addresses the POPI Act compliance requirement as is. Okay. Again, we provide all the contact information here as well. Of course, if you actually are collecting children's information, this privacy notice doesn't address that, right? We basically say you don't collect information of children under the age of 18, or at least you don't know whether they are under the age of 18. That's more like it, right? The other piece that is important here to mention is whether you sell any data. Okay, this privacy notice makes an implicit assumption that you do not sell data. Okay, and that's an important consideration to take. Okay, having said that, publish it. And then the WordPress plugin. Okay, we provide you detailed instructions on how to deploy a WordPress plugin. And my recommendation is, if you're not technically savvy, download the WordPress plugin and send it to your digital marketing team or the website marketing team, and have them deploy it and send them this video as well. Okay. Now, having said that, you know, we are done. Okay. Once we are done, there are only 2 tasks left in this. So 75% done. What are the 2 things that are left after this is all complete? Just a second. Let me do the 2 things that are left are sending the policy change notices to your partners, customers, vendors, and others. Okay, that's one. And you know, if you have any social media links, privacy links for reference that you need to keep, that you need to plug in. Okay, that's another one. Those are the only 2 tasks left. You could always do them in your time, you know, but you can see This whole thing got done in barely 15 minutes while I was doing the demo for you. And you might take a little bit more time reading through it and understanding what needs to be done. Going back through this video that we just did, we're going to send this video so you have an idea on where things are. Okay, so it kind of helps you with this whole process, right? Now, having said that, let's go back to it, right? You have the registration of information officers. You have all the data needed to assert your lawful processing. You could deploy your PAIA manual, edit your PAIA manual for your own company, not some generic manual, a template that you could download from the information regulator as well. And it's the same thing that we have actually captured in a different way. It's the same manual. And then the public privacy policy, which is really critical for you to deploy and have. And of course, the WordPress plugin helps you deploy the forms, the manuals and the policy notices and things like that. Okay. Having said that, that should put a smile on your face, and you've got all of this done. Doesn't cost you a dime and costs you probably half an hour of your time to get it done. So sign up. Okay. Having said that, we finished the demonstration and we finished all of this. We can talk about other things that we do, right? We are a software company. We have what is called usage-based pricing model. Okay, I'll show you what it means. This is self-managed. You can self-manage your usage. There's no minimum fees. You can cancel anytime. All the billing is done in Rand. Okay, this is for things that you need in addition to what we just showed, right? For example, in our Lite package, which doesn't cost you anything, you got the privacy policy and the PAIA manual. In our Pro package, you get your website terms of use, the cookie policies, and the sub-processor list that need to be displayed publicly on your website as well. Your employee privacy notices need to go on your internal sites, not public sites. Maybe your candidate notices need to go on your public sites, right? And you need a manual for your data subject access rights management, which is the standard operating procedures. We provide that. We provide a direct marketing policy. More importantly, IT security policies, social media usage policy, and something really critical for you, which is the data breach incident plan, right? That what do you do in terms of ransomware? Do you have a backup? What is your policy associated with it? How do you go about doing it? And all the amendments and the vendor agreements that you need to do, intercompany transfer agreements, if that's what you need. And we provide you the training, information officer training as is, right? We've already put all of this online in all for a simple monthly fee of under 1,000 Rand, 980 Rand a month. Okay, and this is billed monthly. Okay, if that's what you're interested in, sign up for that. Okay, we can show you how to work through that. Now, having said that, you could also do vendor assessments and the security assessments and the impact assessments, etc. Now, we will walk you through it. This is not the right forum. We don't have enough time to actually do all of that work. You could sign up and schedule a free one-on-one meeting with me, and that's that's time and help. I'll drop it and I'll give you a free copy of the book also. Having said that, Brad, we are ready for Q&A.
Yep. So I've got a few that have come in. As somebody asked if the POPI Lite is free, and I think we answered that already, which is yes. And then, so where would one display notices if the website was not active or if the website was down? So it depends on the nature of the business, right? If it's something that someone can walk into, then you can always, if it's a store, you can have it available at the store, or if it's a school or something like that, you could have it at the front office. Have it available upon request if for some reason it's not available electronically, right? So or if you were giving, if it's a job applicant, right, and maybe or not a job applicant, but a new hire. It's a part of a package of paper that they get or something like that. There's any number of ways to do it. It's really going to depend on the process and that. So someone asked, how do you update the children clause if your company operates in a school environment and serves primary schools? So, I mean, that's going to get, if you're operating in that type of environment and a significant data about schools, I think we've probably gone beyond light, right? In the sense that you're going to need to consider all of the elements of the law that come into play if you're collecting data about children, and it depends somewhat, right? If you are hiring people who are working on site at a school or something like that, and they're not necessarily intaking a bunch of information about the children, like they're cleaning floors or something like that, maybe you don't need all of that. It's going to depend on a case-by-case basis again. So yeah. Can one person register as an information officer for more than one organization? I believe yes.
Yes.
There shouldn't be an
but
issue
they
there.
should be employee of the of that
Right.
organization.
Yeah.
So it can't be
Good
that
call.
you could have a deputy. This is the clarification we received quite some time back. You could have a deputy who is not an employee, designated, who could be operating under the information officer, who could be outside the company. But the information officer has to be either the owner of the company or part owner of the company or an employee or a CEO, some executive.
Yeah, that's a great point, DB, because that's one point again where there's a few of these that are different than say like a GDPR, right? Because like in Europe, you can hire a third party consultant that can act as and be registered as your information officer. That is not the case in South Africa. They have to be working for the company. So that's a great distinction in answering that question. If I think this is DB, I'll kick this one over to you. If any of the information has to be amended in the PAIA manual or POPI at a larger scale, can that be done within the platform with ease?
Yes.
I believe the answer.
You can edit
the answer
it,
is yes. So,
amend it, and you can actually publish it and deploy it directly on the website.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, you have complete flexibility to edit it. Go back and change the catalog items, change the purposes of each item. You can do everything and regenerate the policy. Yeah.
Yep, we've got a good system in the back. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, and then I think the only other thing that's if you join a company where compliance being one of the core functions, where should you start checking the company's been doing the right thing in that regard? I mean, look for ask for things. Can I see your PAIA manual? Can I see the policy on the website? Just ask some of the questions that we've been asking today in terms of how do you respond to a data subject request, those kinds of things. But asking for some of the basic documentation to determine whether or not they have it's usually a good start. But yeah.
Okay, somebody's asked a question. Is it possible for somebody not to sign up but require a one-on-one session? Sure. I just dropped the session aspect of it. Link, sign up. Doesn't cost you much. I mean, I'm okay. Just to answer more questions, no problem.
Yep, and somebody had also asked, if there's potential to do either present in a corporate setting or I'd assume do some sort of trainings that can. Get in touch with DV. We can, depending on what the setting is and what you need, we can certainly have that discussion. So
cool. I guess if there are no more questions, we are right on the dot, right on. Oh, some question just popped up.
Please send us your
contact information, DV.
You could either, I'm sending it right now.
Yep.
Or just put
actually he posted a
in
link
my
up
calendar.
there.
The calendar is my calendar.
Yeah, so he posted links to his calendar as well. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So
the calendar is right there. Okay. Great. Any last comments, Brad, JC?
I don't think so. Not on my end.
I think it's good.
Great.
We look forward to working with everyone.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, everyone, and also.
Sorry, one last thing I will stress because it just popped up. Everyone should register. Somebody said, if I'm a small company Into consulting, in doing consulting work, yes,
Yes.
register.
Everybody must
So,
register, and
yes.
everybody must have a privacy policy, and everybody must have a PAIA manual. Everybody must have a ability to do the subject request intake methods.
Yes.
All the basic elements that we covered today to get
Yep.
done are required. Okay, let me put it in a very simple way. These
Yeah.
are the must-haves
Yep.
for every company.
If you're hearing the sound of my voice, you must comply.
Okay, thank you, everybody,
Great.
and
Thanks, everybody.
best of luck. If you have any questions, get on our calendars. Appreciate that.